the culture of your organization doesn't kind of 80% match your beliefs and your values are, it's not really going to work when you believe people and when you trust people. Those who are like you are going to immediately trust you. You know, in tech, a lot of people say, even my wife could do it, or even my mom could do it. I just hate it. You realize that you don't really have freedom of speech. But actually, as you get higher and higher up in the leadership, it ends up being that you don't actually have freedom of thought.
Are there any, secret skills that you want to share with us today?
There's,
Welcome to Women Who Lead. This is the podcast that I wish I'd had when I was a woman in leadership just starting out. So my friends, I have done you a big favor. I have selected some of the most inspiring women in leadership, and I've assembled them in a series of conversations where they're going to share their tips, tricks, frameworks, stories, everything to support you to bloom into the next season of your career. Welcome to Women Who Lead. And today I am delighted to be joined by a woman who absolutely leads and who I met leading too, who is Maria Shiao. And she is former CRO, sales extraordinaire, leader extraordinaire, coach extraordinaire. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ruth. This is really a big pleasure to be here today. To be fair, this is the first time I'm actually doing a podcast.
No
So
way.
you're going to have to bear with me.
I love it.
I've prepared thoroughly.
Yeah. Well, I am
you so much.
thrilled to have you. Thrilled because we met in the context of work, right? It's so important for women that we have role models in each other, right? And whenever I get to interact with or, just share space with women in leadership in my own career, I was like, I need to stay in touch with you. I need to know you. I need to keep knowing you. So I'm very happy that we've managed to do that. To kick us off, can you tell me, what does it mean to you to be in bloom in work and in life?
I think you made me think a lot, right? Because I know kind of your work and you share a lot of what you do at Bloom. And I think I kind of narrowed it down to just one thing, is basically being in balance or being synchronous, right, between your values and the organization or the family or wherever you are, meaning that you can be yourself. So being in a safe space where you can be yourself, and that's when you bloom.
And it's fair to say, though, right? When we think about authenticity, when we think about what it means to be ourselves, it's super hard to be ourselves, particularly as women, right? Because there are so many things in society that can and do alter us, right? And I realized a couple of years ago, maybe slightly longer than that, I had this awful moment of clarity where it's hang on a minute, my personality is a performance, right? I've learned a series of ways of being to stay safe in the world, which means then it's well, who am I? And obviously then I got deep and realized I'm just a soul in a body and la la la. But this idea of being authentic as a woman in leadership, how did you step into that? How did you become that in your own leadership journey?
Early in your career, you don't actually realize anything about whether you're authentic or not. It's not a thing, right? You kind of in the moment and trying to get ahead and getting a job and then the next job, etc. And I think it only came later in life, this whole authenticity and being yourself and being able to be yourself. Because I think you realize that as you become more senior is very important because it has consequences. I mean, not only legal and regulatory or whatever, but also kind of on your team, right? Kind of what you say is important, and they interpret what you say in whichever way they do. But also that you have the pressure of the organization basically scripting what you should say. In one sense, I kind of use this journalistic picture, right? As in, well, at one point you realize that you don't really have freedom of speech. But actually, as you get higher and higher up in the leadership, it ends up being that you don't actually have freedom of thought. So, and this is where culture, a company's culture or an organizational culture comes in. I guess it's bad enough when you don't necessarily have freedom of speech or you have to kind of watch what you say because it has to be within guidelines. It has an impact and what your team's going to think or what the organization is going to think. But it gets really bad when you start feeling that you don't actually have freedom of thought. And that's where authenticity comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Because if the culture of your organization doesn't, well, at least let's say 80% to give a number. If it doesn't kind of 80% match kind of what your beliefs and your values are, it's never really going to work.
No.
Right? And that's where something that I didn't realize earlier in my career, this is where your mental health starts suffering, for sure. But your mental health and your physical health are related. And then your whole self kind of is affected.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see the whole, how can you be authentic, and how the environment that you're in allows you or not to be authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be very extreme cases, obviously, where, there's some of us have neurodiversity, different lives, different ways we were educated. With a certain bound, right? There's going to be a match.
This idea of, being authentic is so challenging, but everything that you've said there is so relevant about being in alignment, right? And, there's a reason why when I start working with people, the Bloom method starts with values. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's the easiest way back in when we don't know who we are. But the challenge, to your point, is we don't know that we don't know who we are, right? Like if I think about, I thought I was being authentic, certainly from my 30s onwards, right? I lived to try to be authentic in that way. But I think there's a deeper wisdom that's hit in my 40s where I am now, where I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know this at all. I actually know nothing, truthfully. But do you think, Maria, that this is just a rite of passage for us, that this is just how life is and we develop the wisdom and then it changes? Or do you think there might be the potential for us to establish the mind-body connection sooner so that we really start to be able to see where things aren't right for us, or where, I feel like we're kind of like heads on sticks right now versus embodied beings who know who we are.
Obviously, my children are all adult. Many of them, 2 of them work in tech. And I can see it with the younger generation that they've actually incorporated that much sooner, right? So they take care of the physical health. They take care of the mental health.
Right.
Which I think is huge. So personally, I think there's hope. So I think it's going to get better. I also hear from other, their friends are the same. Other friends of ours who have adult children tell us the same thing. Also, I think with technology. I mean, for all we say about social media and digital and everything, there's actually been a huge opportunity for people to share, like you do, or like we're doing now. And also, it's become a more business as usual for people to seek advice, get a mentor. All of those things have been internalized now. People who want it can get the help. I guess the question is more like, is everybody going to want the help, or are people reverting back to old behaviors, which happens a lot as well, right?
Like, how did you figure out the mind-body stuff, right? Like, because, we live these divided lives where things look like they're going well for us, but deep down in our soul, we can't feel that they're not. Yeah. So how did you create that connection in yourself?
It's only come up much later in my career, which I must say is a missed opportunity in a way.
Yeah.
So physical health, sort of like, working out and eating well, that's okay. I think most of my life I've tried to do that and I kind of know the principles. But the deep connection between mental health and your entire kind of self came later. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until a lot of things kind of broke down at the same time. That's what caused a kind of willingness to get it sorted out. So for example, I'd never had a therapist ever in my life until, a few years ago. I could have probably done it sooner, I think. But anyway, we are where we are. So now, for example, it's interesting how I did prioritize my mental health. But also, I'm prioritizing different things. So, for example, physically, I prioritize sleeping, actually, which some people think might be a bit crazy. But actually, doing a bit of thinking and analyzing what was going on, actually, I realized that sleeping sort of, at least 7 hours a day or a night actually was basically the root cause of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right? It has an impact on anxiety, stress, being sharp in your mind, etc. So for me, sort of from a health perspective, that's it. I can not eat maybe or whatever, not work out, but I definitely want to sleep.
Yeah, it's so important.
So a little bit of a missed opportunity. And of course, I'm of a generation where you just dived right into kind of your career and then
just
you had a
got on with
family,
it.
Children, etc. And you didn't bother too much about it.
Yeah. No, at 44, I think we were still doing it that way when when I started out too, like 100%, you just get on with it, right? To anybody that is just getting on with it, like, and whether, you know, whatever age you are, I do want to say that I am so thankful for the timing of my life, of the way that I did figure things out, because it's through these experiences that I now have this deep wisdom that I get to share with other women, right? If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't be able to support other women to make different choices. I wouldn't see the problem as viscerally as I do if I hadn't lived the problem, right? And I think that's so important, right? For, you know, for the kind of wisdom that we develop within us and that we're able to share it, whether that's in a job or whether that's in your own business or whether that's something else, right?
Well, you touch on something that's very important. Do you have to have lived through something, or can somebody help you with their experience of having lived through something? And I think, obviously, you see this with teenagers. It's kind of useless to tell them that, you know, something's wrong.
That's it.
They're just going to do it. And I think there's a little bit of a balance there.
Yeah.
The other bit that I picked up on what you just said is there's one trait that I think we both have and many people have, and I think everybody needs to hone it, especially in this day of generative AI, etc. Is actually the ability to learn, even if it's 20 years later, like kind of reflecting on what happened and learning and doing something about it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think you would fit, or coaches fit, or your mentors fit, is in actually helping you kind of dissect a little bit what happened faster.
Yeah.
And not having to wait for 10 years to realize, oh, what happened 10 years ago was... So I think, so this is kind of a balance between you do need to live things to kind of internalize them.
Yeah.
But also, many times, not everybody is capable of kind of learning and extracting the consequences and from things.
I had to feel my pain. I had to feel my pain to learn. I feel you on that. And now, speaking of feeling pain, obviously, there's a certain degree of pain that we feel as women in leadership in a male-dominated world. I wanted to ask you, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you were sort of starting to step up in your career and sit at those leadership tables?
Okay, so I have to tell you a little bit of my life as a youngster, because I would qualify that the way I was brought up to when I was a teenager, which is kind of very formative, as basically blissful ignorance. So I grew up in an all-girls school, but very, very good school, where we had great teachers, including in science and math, very qualified, very encouraging. And so I never really grew up thinking that there was any barrier or any problem with doing whatever I wanted to do, whatever profession I wanted to have. And I still keep in touch with some of my childhood friends. A lot of them have had fantastic careers, super jobs in all kinds of industries. And I think that comes from that sort of confidence, or that ignorance.
Ignorance that this is what the world is.
And some people find it very inspiring, but I think it was because it was blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
So I then ended up, thanks to my uncle, who basically said, well, she's really good at math, send her to the US to study engineering. I'm like, okay. And my dad said, okay. Which is great. I then went to like this doubly, triply male-dominated environment. I went to engineering school, electrical engineering, right? So, which is like not male-dominated.
Super male. Superman.
So like hardware, doing microelectronics. And then went to like a super male-dominated industries, right? Because I started off in semiconductor, and then telecoms, which is just a bit better, and then IT. I mean, all of these industries, tech in general. Sorry. I guess for me, it was all kind of, that's the way it is. I was lucky, or maybe ignorant, that nobody pointed out that because I was a woman, I couldn't do it. I guess it helps that I did really, really well. And only found out 30 years later, all of these male friends from engineering school told me, oh, you know, Maria, like we were like in awe of you, and like, don't you remember we were queuing outside of your room to get help with homework? And I'm like, I don't remember that. So anyway, I guess in a sense that's kind of the lucky part, in the sense that, you know, I was sufficiently good at it that nobody even questioned whether I was a girl or a boy or whatever, right? And so I think it's always something important for people to think that you really have to love something to be good at it, and therefore that automatically generates confidence.
Yeah.
But also generates a little bit of a respect.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the difficult part, right? Because it starts in childhood. Reflecting on that, I was like, okay, well, if somebody when I was little would have told me, oh, yeah, like some mothers do, and I actually pick up on them and I really tell them off. Oh, she's really not good at math. I even did it to my daughter in a different way. And it's like she's actually kept that in mind forever. So kind of what parents say, mothers, fathers, to children, you have to be very careful.
It really matters.
Right? Because they're young, so like they just internalize it. And I was lucky that I never had that kind of input or anything like that said to me throughout my studies, etc., that I didn't even know.
Right.
It was a problem. It was only later that somebody pointed out to me, like, well, okay, the numbers are there. It is a problem, right? Later on, I think it had to do more with, I guess you would call it probably a sort of a feminine trait. The problem I had is more about authenticity, and probably the fact that as women, we usually are less likely to want to compromise on that. I think men are the same. We're braver, I think, in that sense. Okay, you're going to be disappointed with my answer because it was luck. I don't know if it was luck or structured or not. I've actually had the chance to be able to move a lot. Okay, so I've moved countries a lot, even within large company. When I was in large companies, I was able to move, and therefore somebody will call it maybe quitting. I guess I would accept that, right? Either quitting because you just moved on, or you quitting because you actually quit. I've had almost like a millennial career. I've worked for a lot of companies. I've never been in the same job for maybe more than 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
I've never been in the same company for more than 6 or 7 years. That's how probably I coped with it.
Yeah.
Right? In the sense that, well, okay, knowing that it's okay to move on and making yourself move or taking the opportunity when it arrives and moving on is probably my coping mechanism. I mean, I'm not only talking about sort of this sexism and racism and all kinds of isms, right? And that was basically part of it luck, that opportunities came up, and some of the times I actually purposely kind of then moved on. But knowing that you can move on and doing it actually is one of those life skills.
It is a life skill. And what you're kind of doing is circumventing the system, which I love. It's like, okay, I'm not even going to wait around to see whether you think I'm good enough to promote me or pay me, whatever. I'm going to go and find that. And it's funny because in my own career, I stayed in jobs a long time until my mid-late 30s. And then I decided, I literally said to myself, I became Maria at that point, and I was like, I'm going to make my next jobs grown-up grad schemes. So 2 years, big leaps, learn a lot, put myself in the pressure cooker, grow. I actually started then jobs with only the intention of being there for 2 years. So I love this freedom. And I have to say, mine, literally just something clicked in my brain as you were talking. I always thought a girls' school or a boys' school. I always thought, wow, that must be really weird because I was always in a mixed school. Mixed schooling system. But suddenly, as you've just said that, it all just clicked into place that because you're not in the structure, because you're just with, and I know there's different social hierarchies that would exist within that anyway, but to actually have the freedom of not assuming that you're not going to be good at something because you're a girl, because everyone's a girl.
Exactly.
I never thought about that before. That's quite incredible. I love it. Oh my gosh. Obviously, you were working in sales roles, right? So you are good at negotiating and asking for what you want, right? Can you share any tips that you have with us for how you got good at doing that? Are there any secret skills that you want to share with us today?
One of the biggest skills that you need to acquire to negotiate or to get something has got to be trust. Okay, so I am lucky because that came naturally to me. In fact, I'm totally, I don't know if they say the same thing in British English, I'm gullible. So I trust people to the point of...
No, that translates.
Being conned, basically. Okay.
Also, sometimes me too.
But by accident, it's not by accident because my parents had family-owned businesses and I was always with people and selling in the shop or restaurant, bars, whatever. Hospitality is a great school, actually, by the way. And so I ended up in kind of gradually in sales, big ticket items, big projects, big things, hardware and software. So the thing is, and that's a risk you have to take. And for me, it wasn't a risk because that's my nature. When you believe people and when you trust people and believe that what they say is what they're going to do, and they can see it, those who are like you are going to immediately trust you. And actually a lot of people, most people are like that. So they're like, okay, well, this is, we can have a conversation or a negotiation.
Yeah.
Also, people who are a little bit more reluctant kind of build trust in you quicker. Mm-hmm. Because that's the whole point of sales, actually. You never really have like 50,000 years to close a sale. And so you have to build that trust quickly. Mm. And it's hard. Unless you kind of have a starting point that is already kind of there. So in terms of advocating for yourself, although I think I was a massively good salesperson and deal closer, big deals, etc., I was just rubbish at advocating for myself. I just basically took the salary that people gave me. I always thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to be paid that much. It's like, and then find out that like people were being paid so much more. I never complained about that either. But I'm going to give you a story of someone that's quite close to me, very early in her career, that was basically in real time asking me for advice during an interview in terms of how much she should be asking. And she'd done her research. She knew how much she wanted. And I just basically said, well, ask for that plus 10%. She got it. Mm. People didn't even bat an eyelid. And then she came back to me and she's like, how did you know that I could get that? And that was such an eye-opener for me. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't know, actually. Which says that you actually have to take the risk. Don't overthink it. What is the worst that could happen?
Right.
Right? So that was always, it was like applying my sales strategy. Just ask for 10% more. Worst that can happen is they're going to give you 10% less or 5% less. Obviously, I did have a little advantage because I knew how salary and job negotiations went.
Yeah.
Right? So that was still within, I knew that was still within of what somebody can give you. But that was great, right? Because that actually gave this person a lot of confidence for her entire career. So do it early on when there's less at stake. Mm. Just try it. The worst that could happen is that they're going to say no.
Yeah.
20 years ago, people said no, and then you just say, yeah, okay. Nowadays, nobody's going to say no, by the way. It's like not correct to just say no. Normally, they're going to say no because of themselves. Volunteer that. And if they don't volunteer, then you just like we coaches do. Ask questions. Don't say why, because why is too wishy-washy, but ask specific questions. What are the things I need to do to get there? When is this going to happen? How can we break it down in steps, etc.? So what, when, right? Can you help me get there? Do I need to talk to other people to help you get there? And then it's more of a conversation. And if you ask the questions, you're kind of more in control, and it's going to give you actionable things to do for you and for your manager, probably, right? Obviously, a recruiter is a little bit different because I have to go back and forth and stuff. But in a salary increase, for example, you just need to ask. Don't take a no for an answer. It's going to be explained, right? And then you're going to get the tidbits of what you need to do.
Yeah. And that's huge. And I've often been working with a client one-on-one. And actually, negotiating, I think, the reason that I say always negotiate is, first of all, I was a recruiter and I know there's always more money in the budget. Second of all, like even if they say no, you build a little bit more respect for yourself. You build a little bit more, self-belief. It doesn't matter. The fact is you've advocated for yourself. And what Maria's just saying is so important, because even if they say no, what you can do is what I did in 2 of my roles. Okay, I'll take the no, but can we agree that in 6 months' time, if I meet these key objectives, that I get there? Right, I did that with a stock award because I was trying to push back on that once. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. I want to take the job, but can we agree that we agree specifics? And then I will get there. And then at that time, then, you can get that increase. One of the things that I love to ask is about the sort of seasons of life and career. And I'm curious to know, Maria, which season really shaped you the most?
I think the season that shaped me the most was my early career. Because I learned a lot of things that I didn't realize until later. So one thing that I learned very early for my first job ever was the value of the network. And not only the value of the network, because I didn't have a black book with like thousands of people. You're gonna love this. The person who connected me to my first job was my mom. She's not an engineer. She's a English teacher. She was teaching in a school. So how was she able to get me my first job as an engineer in the semiconductor industry, right? And so that's where I immediately learned what the network is and respect for everybody you connected with. So I hate it, for example, when, in tech, a lot of people say, even my wife could do it, or even my mom could do it. I just hate it. Because my mom, who is my mom, she's 87, she got me my first job. Why? Because you don't know who you know. You don't know who the other person across the room is, right? So it's like, if you just qualify someone as mom or grandma, which I'm now, it's kind of totally wrong. What do you know? That person could be married to the CEO of the company you want to work in, or she happened to know a whole bunch of, the person who connected me to this expat network where the people who were going to hire me were. And I just that just happened. Then they found the person, they connected me. I interviewed at JFK Airport in New York, and I got the job. It was like, okay, so there's like a trick here. And so that was it. Respect your network. Don't assume anything about anything, which I learned because it was my mom. Your network is going to get you whatever you need is probably going to come from your network. The other thing I learned is about this feminine and masculine energy traits. Most of my early career managers, who were all men, were actually very conscious of their feminine traits. And they knew it, and they said so. That basically showed me the diversity or kind of the two brains, whatever you want to call it, very early on. So that was alignment. There was alignment between myself and the people who hired me many, many times over, internally, externally. And therefore, for me, it was a given. So this is about this blissful ignorance thing, right? That I never suffered from that early in my career. And I would say that if you're lucky enough that take care of your early career.
Yeah.
We talk about childhood trauma and stuff like that. Actually, in a career, your early career is basically your building block. And I consider myself to be super lucky because all the bigger problems and more hurtful things, I guess, came super late in my career. But the other day I was reflecting, I was like, if that had happened to me when I was 20 years old, it would have just probably crushed me.
Right.
Or made me totally sort of like detached and not want to get involved or not be myself anymore because I needed to protect myself or whatever. But I never did. So I think it's that kind of free-range child kind of thing. I was allowed to do whatever I needed to do. I was able to be myself for the first, 10, 15 years of my career. That then helped me cope later. And it's not a black or white, right? I mean, you can always get over. So if you need help, get help by all means, etc., or like move on.
Yeah.
Don't get into kind of toxic environments, etc. It's easier said than done. But for sure, how you build your early career is going to have a massive impact on your later career. So think very hard about what you want in life.
Right.
And learn to say no, because I didn't learn to say no. It's like a concentric circles. It's like the circle of life keeps repeating itself in a way. But hopefully, through your earlier experiences, you can then build and build and build all the layers till you get where you want to get.
Yeah.
But then also, right now, I'm in one of those phases. I mean, I'm in the latter phases of my career, obviously, where the biggest pleasure is actually sort of the intergenerational thing. If I can help anyone in any shape or form, in a small way or in a big way, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I have the luxury of being able to do that.
Yeah, it's truly beautiful. Thank you. Just one final thing. What's the one thing that you wish you'd known sooner?
Learn to say no, I think. I just said that. Because it's one of those things that is ingrained in you. Kind of the meaning of no comes from childhood, probably. Yeah. Learning how to say no constructively and not in a, let's say, almost childish way in your head is probably the biggest thing that I should have learned to do.
Yeah, I feel that, sis. I feel it. And I feel you. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your wisdom and your energy and your amazingness. I truly do admire and appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. This was amazing, an amazing experience. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. If you have liked this episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear some of what we were talking about. Go and check out our other episodes, and then also head over to ourtimetobloom.com to find out more about Bloom and how you can get involved.